You don't insult a species by taking their guns away. You insult them by handing them a wreck and laughing while they climb inside. The Combine gave Hank Delgado a dead or tugged and called it a ship. They expected humiliation. They forgot what humans do with junk. Listen closely. The docking ring at Carina Verge smelled like ozone, spilled coolant, and fear. It was the kind of smell that soaked into your clothes and followed you home. Hank Delgado stood on the observation deck with his hands in the pockets of a flight suit that had been patched so many times the original fabric was just a rumor. Below him, floating in the pale light of a dying sun, sat the mule. The mule was not a ship. It was an accusation. 40 years old, decommissioned twice, welded back together by men who were now dead. Its hull was a patchwork of mismatched alloys, gray and rust orange, bristling with clamps it didn't need anymore. The Combined Port Authority had towed it out of the boneyard that morning, dumped it in berth 9, and stamped its registry with a single word in their flowing script. The translator rendered it as joke. "She's yours, Earthman," said Subconsul Vex, his 4 eyes glittering with the particular joy of a bureaucrat delivering cruelty legally. "When the Verge run, and the Combine grants your colony a trade charter, lose, and Carina Verge starves under the embargo for another decade. Those were the terms your governor accepted." Hank looked at the wreck. He looked at the sleek silver couriers lined up in berths 1 through 8, each one crewed by a Combine racing guild with a century of pedigree. Then he looked at Vex. "Where's the ignition key?" Vex laughed. It sounded like glass breaking in a drain. Snorts. "There's no key. There's barely an engine. That is the point, Earthman. They always tell you the point. That's the thing about arrogant empires. They can't help explaining the joke. They need you to understand exactly how hopeless you are, because your despair is the only part of the entertainment they actually care about." Hank walked down to berth 9 and put his bare hand on the mule's hull. The metal was cold. It was honest. "All right, girl," he muttered. "Let's see what they forgot to take out of you." The Verge run was older than the embargo. Once a cycle, in the years before the Combine decided humanity was a stain on their star charts, captains raced the length of the Shatterbelt. 400,000 kilometers of tumbling rock, radiation shoals, and gravity shear, ending at the gate station above the colony. It was supposed to be a celebration of piloting. Now it was an execution with a trophy at the end. The rules were simple. Leave the ring. Cross the belt. Dock at the gate. Any ship, any crew, any method short of firing on another racer. Hank read the rules twice. Then he read them a third time, slowly, the way he used to read salvage contracts back on Mars. The devil was never in the fine print. The devil was in what the fine print didn't say. "Any ship," he said to the empty hangar. "Any method." He spent the first night inside the mule with a hand lamp between his teeth and grease up to his elbows. The reactor was a Gen 3 fission bottle, the kind Combine engineers wouldn't use to heat a bathroom. Analog, mechanical governors, physical control rods you moved with actual levers. Their inspection teams had gutted the ship of everything they considered valuable, which meant they'd stripped out the navigation AI, the inertial compensators, the sensor mesh. They'd left the engine, because the engine was worthless to them. Hank sat in the pilot's cradle, which still smelled faintly of the last man's fear, and ran his hand over the dead console. No neural link, no predictive flight model, just gauges, switches, and a throttle you moved with your hand. They thought they'd given him a coffin. They'd actually given him the only ship in the race that couldn't be switched off from a control tower. "You beautiful pile of garbage," Hank whispered. "We're going to make them regret their education." Word spread the way word always spreads on a station where nobody has anything better to do. By morning, half of Carina Verge had crowded the observation glass to watch the human crawl around inside the wreck. Combine officers made a game of it. They took bets on which component would fail first. "Reactor containment," said one. "Life support," said another. "The species sweeps heat like a leaking pipe. He'll cook himself." Laughter. Always the laughter. Hank had grown up on it. Every human in Combined space grew up on it. The way you grow up on gravity. It pressed down on you from birth, and you either learned to stand up under it or you stayed on the floor. He was elbows deep in the fuel preheater when the first visitor came. A Corvette pilot named Ceres, 8 feet of lean muscle and chitin, captain of the Silver Talon, 3-time champion of the inner circuit. She ducked through the hatch without asking, because aliens like Ceres never asked. Earthman. Her voice was a low buzz through the translator. I came to see the sacrifice. You came to see the ship, Hank said, not looking up. Same as everyone. You're all obsessed with it. It's a 40-year-old or tug, and you can't stop staring. Why is that? Ceres' mandibles clicked. Because you are going to die in it, and the galaxy enjoys foreshadowing. Hank finally looked up. His face was streaked with grease. He smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just found something interesting inside a dead machine. You know what your problem is, Ceres. All of you. You fly ships that are smarter than you. Your NAV computers think. Your compensators decide. Your throttles negotiate. You're not pilots. You're passengers with opinions. He tapped the mule's console. This thing doesn't think. It doesn't negotiate. It does exactly what I tell it, the second I tell it. In the belt, that's not a disadvantage. That's the whole game. You believe your reflexes outmatch predictive computing. No, Hank said, turning back to the preheater. I believe a rock doesn't care about your predictions. Get out of my light. They launched at dawn, if you could call the shift of station lights a dawn. 9 ships on the runway of the void. 8 of them gleamed. One of them looked like a construction accident. The Combine broadcast the race live across 3 systems. It was meant to be propaganda, a demonstration, a public execution of human hope, narrated in their smooth announcer voices. Hank listened to the translation feed with one ear while he ran his final checks. The announcer was explaining, in pitying tones, that the human vessel appeared to be venting something. He's venting coolant before the start line, the announcer said, delighted. The human ship is breaking down in front of us. Hank grinned and opened the valve wider. He wasn't venting coolant. He was dumping mass. Every kilogram of fluid he didn't need. Every panel, every oar clamp, every piece of dead weight the boneyard crews had bolted on over 40 years, he cut loose and let drift. The mule shed 2 tons of junk in 9 minutes. Shedding mass. The oldest trick in the oldest book. The one written in the thin air of Earth's first orbit, when humans flew tin cans held together by math and stubbornness. Verge control, this is the mule, Hank said, flipping the transmit switch with a greasy thumb. Requesting start clearance. A pause. The controller's voice came back dry and amused. Clearance granted, mule. Try to die beyond sensor range. It saves on paperwork. No promises. The countdown hit 0. And 8 silver arrows tore into the dark. The mule lurched off the line like a drunk getting out of a chair, and 3 systems laughed at once. For the first 100,000 kilometers, the race looked exactly the way the Combine had promised it would. The guild couriers ran in a tight, beautiful formation, their drives leaving thin blue threads across the black. The mule wallowed half an AU behind them alone, its fission bottle howling at 103% of rated output. Inside the cradle, Hank was sweating. Of course he was sweating. The Corvette officer had meant it as an insult, the leaking pipeline, and it was the funniest thing anybody had said all week, because sweating was about to win him the race. Humans shed heat through their skin. Their ships, the old ones, the honest ones, shed heat the same way, through radiator veins and fluid loops, crude and simple and impossible to overheat if you knew what you were doing. The sleek Combine couriers ran their drives through cryomagnetic bottles that could only hold race output for 90 minutes before they had to throttle down or melt. 90 minutes. Hank had read every guild racing spec ever published, twice, in the archive of a station library where nobody ever checked out anything. 90 minutes of glory, then cooling. The race was 4 hours long. He settled in. He drank recycled coffee that tasted like a battery and flew his wreck like a mule. Steady and dumb and relentless, eating the dark 1 kilometer at a time. At the 2-hour mark, the formation ahead began to drift apart as the couriers rotated into cooling cycles. Hank started picking them off. Not with speed, with schedule. A Corvette scout dropped back to vent, and the mule grumbled past it, close enough that Hank could see the pilot staring through the canopy. He waved. Snorts, The translator didn't have a rendering for what the Corvus said back. The Shatterbelt began at the second checkpoint, and the Shatterbelt did not care about anyone's pedigree. It was a river of stone 400 kilometers wide, the corpse of a moon that had died badly. Rocks the size of stations tumbled in slow, patient chaos, and between them ran currents of dust that sanded hulls down to bright metal in minutes. The guild couriers dove into it the way they dove into everything, trusting their predictive computers to thread them through the gaps. Hank did something the race commentators called a navigation error. He went around the edge, not through the belt, along its flank, riding the gravity shear where the dead moon's mass still tugged at the fabric of things, letting the pull sling the mule forward like a stone from a strap. "You cannot slingshot a race line," the announcer scoffed. "The human is simply lost." Humans had been stealing speed from gravity since before the Combine's youngest colony world had a name for the sky. Every kilometer of the shear was free velocity, and free velocity was free fuel, and free fuel at hour 3 of a 4-hour race was the difference between a ship and a legend. Still, the belt fought back. A shard the size of a house came spinning out of the shadow of a bigger rock, and Hank saw it with his eyes a half-second before the mule's one surviving proximity alarm bothered to scream. He killed the port thruster, stomped the ventral pedal, and rolled the whole ship around its spine like a barrel, feeling the frame groan in a register that meant we are too old for this. The shard kissed the hull. It took the number 2 antenna and a long strip of paint, and it took Hank's heart rate somewhere past 140. And then it was gone, tumbling away into the dark, indifferent. "Sorry, girl," Hank gasped. "Won't happen again." Behind him, deeper in the belt, 2 of the guild couriers weren't so lucky. Their computers had plotted a corridor that existed when the computers plotted it, and didn't exist 4 seconds later when the rock moved. One ship came out of the collision spinning, drive dead. The other simply stopped transmitting. Hank heard the distress call go out. He heard the race control channel respond with smooth, practiced regret. Rescue tugs would be dispatched after the race concluded, per regulation. After the race, a pilot was tumbling through a rock field in a dead ship, and the law said wait. Hank looked at his velocity. He looked at his fuel. He looked at the long, dark gap between the mule and the gate, and then he did the thing that lost him the race and won him everything else. He turned around. The combined broadcast booth went silent when the mule's drive flare reversed on their tracking boards. The announcer, to his credit, recovered fast. "The human is withdrawing," he announced smoothly. "A prudent no. Wait, he is returning to the belt." Ceres' ship, the Silver Talon, was the one tumbling. Hull breached at the drive housing, compensators fried. Her cockpit a bubble of air inside a coffin rolling end over end through the debris current. Her own guild mates had screamed past her without slowing, because the charter was everything, because the race was everything, because that was what the Combine taught its pilots to be. The mule came alongside her wreck at the bottom of hour 3, matching her roll, which no sane pilot attempts, because matching a roll means surrendering your ship to the same chaos that's killing the other one. Hank flew it by hand, by eye, by the seat of a flight suit that had been patched past memory, nudging the mule's hull against the Talon's spine until metal kissed metal and held. He extended the oar clamps. The big, ugly, rusted clamps the Combine had laughed at, the clamps they'd left on the wreck, because they were worthless. Worthless things are only worthless to people who've never needed to hold onto something in the dark. "Ceres," Hank said on the open channel, "if you can hear me, don't touch anything. Your cargo now." A long hiss of static. Then her voice, thin and stripped of every ounce of arrogance. "Earthman, the rules, the charter, your colony." "Yeah," Hank said, lighting the main drive with a ship and a half hanging off his frame. "My colony's got a saying, too. You don't leave people in the belt. Hold on. What happened in the last hour has been replayed on Combine news feeds ever since, usually with the sound off, because the sound is a human laughing over the engine noise. The mule, dragging the dead Silver Talon in its clamps, came out of the Shatterbelt 40 minutes behind the lead pack with its reactor past redline, its radiators glowing a dull furnace orange, and its pilot singing something in an old Earth language that the translators refused to touch. Ahead, at the finish, The gate station hung above Carina Verge, ringed by the Combine blockade fleet. Every ship there to witness the colony's humiliation. The lead couriers were already lining up for the ceremonial final run. And then the blockade did what blockades do when something unexpected happens. It panicked. The flagship's traffic control threw up a dampening field across the approach corridor, a wideband suppression wave designed to knock out the drive computers of any vessel that didn't broadcast Combine authority codes. They'd used it 100 times to stop smugglers. It was elegant. It was absolute. It killed every ship in the race. 8 silver couriers, the pride of the guilds, died in space at the same instant, their Neuralink drives and predictive computers switching off like candles in a wind, because the dampening field didn't care about their authority codes. It cared about their network cores, and everything the Combine built had a network core. Everything except one 40-year-old ore tug with mechanical fuel valves, analog gyros, physical control rods, and a human being with his hand on a throttle made of actual steel. The mule flew through the dampening field like it was weather. Hank watched 8 dead champions drift past his canopy, their crews pounding on consoles that no longer answered, and he felt no triumph about it, because triumph wasn't the point. The point was the gate, the dock, and the ship in his clamps. "Verge Gate, this is the mule," he said, and his voice was very calm, the calm of a man who had been tired for 4 hours and was almost done, coming in hot with a casualty in tow. "Clear berth 1. Silence on the channel. Then a new voice, older, colder, rank heavy enough to bend the air. Admiral Thexa herself, commanding the blockade, the architect of the embargo, the woman who had designed this whole race to bury human hope under 10 kilometers of official laughter. "Mule, you are instructed to release your tow and stand off. The Silver Talon will be recovered by combined vessels." "Negative, Admiral. Your vessels are all dead in the water behind me. Mine isn't. I'm docking, and I'm handing her crew to the medbay myself. And then, per the terms your subconsul was so happy to explain to me, you and I are going to have a conversation about a trade charter." "You have not won the race, Earthman." Hank looked at his board, looked at the gate, looked at the drifting fleet of the most advanced navy in 3 systems, silenced by its own cleverness, while his patchwork relics sailed through the gap they had made for him. "Admiral," he said gently, "your rules said any ship, any method, first hull to dock with a living crew. I checked. I read it 3 times. You're welcome to come argue about it in person. I hear your flagship's got a lovely tow hitch." The docking clamps took the mule at hour 4 and 6 minutes, and the sound of the locks engaging rolled through the gate station like a verdict. By the time Hank climbed out of the cradle, drenched in sweat, hands shaking with 4 hours of adrenaline and fishing bottle vibration, the corridor outside berth 1 was full. Combine officers, colony officials, camera drones from 3 systems, and at the front of them, Admiral Thexa, tall and gray and furious, flanked by an honor guard that didn't know where to point its rifles. Behind her, the medics were lifting Ceres out of the Silver Talon's ruptured canopy. The Corvith champion was alive, burned, battered, one arm hanging wrong, but alive. As they carried her past, she turned her head, and her 4 eyes found Hank, and the galaxy's proudest racing guild watched its greatest pilot lift her good arm and press her fist to her chest. The salute of a predator to a warrior. One by one, slowly, the combined officers in the corridor did the same. Thexa did not, but she stepped aside, which from an admiral is its own kind of kneeling. "The charter," she said quietly, "will be ratified within the cycle. Your colony eats, Earthman. Your ships trade. The embargo ends." Her eyes narrowed, but do not mistake this for respect. You exploited a loophole and a catastrophe. Hank wiped the grease off his hand onto his flight suit, looked her in the eye, and shook his head. "No, Admiral. You build an empire where every ship needs permission to fly, and then you bet a colony's worth of lives that nothing could fly without it. That's not a loophole. That's a design flaw." He jerked a thumb back at the mule, dripping coolant onto their pristine deck, ugly and honest and still ticking. "We don't build pretty. We build things that stay on when the lights go out. Y'all should try it sometime." They say the mule never flew again. They say the Combine offered Hank 9 figures for the hull, to study it, to bury it, to make sure no one ever saw it again. And he told them the price was the ship plus their admiral's personal apology, broadcast on every channel that had aired the race. They say the apology is still the most watched transmission in Verge history. And they say that in the boneyard at Carina Verge, where dead ships go to wait, the human crews leave the wrecks a little more intact than the law requires. Because you never know. Because a wreck is only a wreck to people who forgot what a wrench is for. Because the galaxy keeps learning the same lesson the hard way. You can take everything from a human except their hands, and with their hands, they'll take back everything else. The Combine gave humanity a scrap heap as a joke. Humanity flew it through their entire fleet, picked up their champion on the way, and parked the joke in berth 1. Turns out the galaxy's most advanced empire had one fatal vulnerability all along. Their ships were smart, and smart things can be switched off. Stubborn things can't. If you felt every kilometer of Hank's run through the Shatter Belt, hit that like button right now and show the galaxy that human stubbornness never goes out of style. Subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY sci-fi stories. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And share this video with your fellow sci-fi fans who know that a wrench beats a supercomputer every single time. Drop a comment below. Would you have turned back for Ceres and lost the race? Or flown on and taken the charter clean? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your tanks full and your analog switches close. See you in the stars.